Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest issue of Comic Book Gentlemen, your podcast where we use our decades in reading comics as comic book fans and discuss some of the most divisive issues in the comic book fandom. I'm your host, Greg, and joined always by Dave.
What's up, everybody?
So, Dave, in nerd history,
Yes.
there's always been rivals. You know, you have Alien versus Predator. Are you Star Trek or are you Star Wars? You know, all those like which one do you subscribe to? The biggest one in comic books is Marvel versus DC, the two big boys.
Yes.
Are you Marvel or are you DC?
I am most definitely Marvel.
So am I. Podcast over. Okay, we figured that out.
Done.
So I find it very interesting that, you know, we both enjoy Marvel, but it's not like we've never tried reading DC.
No.
So I'm curious, like, I think we can go, like, step by step. We'll start, like, where we first started with comics, kind of, like, why we chose Marvel versus DC, and then kind of get into the details of, like, why we like one over the other.
Right.
And maybe hopefully we can figure out by the end of this is, like, is there a definitive reason why Marvel is better, or is it just completely subjective and, you know, we just like Marvel, and that's the end of it, and maybe one day we'll get a DC fan in here, but probably never happen. But yeah, what is your history with DC? Like, why did you... did you ever try reading it? Or
I think my history with DC probably goes back, like most people my age, back to the early exposure of Christopher Reeve's Superman in the movies. Certainly cartoons, Justice League cartoon from way back in the day. But as far as comic books are concerned, it was just never something that I even dabbled in early on in reading comics. It was always centered around, for the most part, Spider-Man and the X-Men on the Marvel side. But at the same time, I was always very fascinated with a couple of the characters on the DC side. Just never went there early enough in my youth in collecting comics. And it was certainly at that time, I think growing up, there was a very divisive push of like, oh, are you Marvel? Oh, you can't, like, you don't read both. You just didn't. You were either Marvel or you were DC. And then when Image split off, it was like, or you Image
awkward step
for that brief time in history. But I didn't know a lot of people that read both. It was, you were one or the other, and the majority of the people that I hung around with at the time that all read comics were predominantly Marvel.
Interesting. Because we've talked about this before in the past, where there wasn't exactly like a huge comic book store or anything in Fort St. John and whatnot. So when you guys went to the the corner stores or whatever you did and the laundromat apparently for comic books, did they have like an even split between Marvel and DC, or did they mainly only have Marvel and that was like the only option? No,
they certainly had both. Like I certainly remember seeing my fair share of Superman or Batman comics, detective comics. The DC, the big boys of DC. The one comic book store that we had for the first little while, I think they were predominantly Marvel as well, because a lot of the older back issue type stuff that you'd see on the walls and hung up, that at the age we were at, you couldn't even imagine paying that much money. $10 for one comic. That's insane.
It's insane.
It was always Marvel. So I do remember seeing it. I do remember, maybe bumping into one or two guys at the comic book store that, you'd start talking to, and then they'd start talking about Justice League, and you'd be like, okay, you lost me.
You're dead to me.
But no, it was just predominantly Marvel. I remember seeing it. It just didn't, for whatever reason, grab me.
Yeah. It's interesting, because it's not like there aren't cool characters in, like, obviously Batman is one of the most popular characters in the world. Superman, for whatever reason, people love Superman. You have Wonder Woman, who's like the most popular female character in the world. Like, it's very interesting to think, it's like, yeah, those people are so cool, I just don't want to read them. Like I remember when I was younger, like you said, like Batman animated series, Batman Beyond, Justice League Unlimited, all amazing shows. You had some, great video games and whatnot, but for some reason, like, I just never felt the need or the urge to read, like, on a regular basis. Now, I will admit, though, it's funny because I was thinking about this when we were prepping for the show. If I had to name my, like, top 10 superheroes, majority of them would be from Marvel. But if I had to name my top 10 storylines, like story arcs, majority of them would be from DC. Because when I was growing up, like, one of my I have multiple influences for comic books, but one of my big influences was my dad.
Yeah.
And my dad, like, his big stuff was DC. Like,
Yeah.
he's definitely a Batman guy. Anything by Frank Miller Batman, like Year One, Dark Knight Returns, he's like, you gotta read it, you gotta read it. I mean, even Watchmen is DC technically with Vertigo and whatnot. So it's very interesting to me to think about that, because it's like, I love Marvel. Like, I definitely agree. I prefer Marvel over DC. But for some reason, when I think like, oh, if I'm going to introduce people to comic books, or if I'm going to go back and read an issue, it's always DC Comics.
Yeah.
Like, at least for major storylines. However, but then you think about it even closely, it's like, it's never regular issue comics. It's always the one-offs. It's always the like big graphic novel storylines where just crazy and like, whoa, like what the heck is that? So I think that's another interesting aspect of DC as well, is like, I've never felt that, like, the only one I've actually tried reading like on a regular basis was Aquaman when they did New 52.
Yeah.
Because Aquaman was always that character that everybody just made fun of, is like, you know, a butt of everybody's joke. But then in New 52, people are like, oh, but, you know, Jeff Johns is on it, and he's actually cool now, and all that stuff. And I was like, oh, yeah, let me check this out. And I checked it out, and it was really good. So I was like keeping up with it. Like, I think that's the only time I ever like actually kept up with it on a regular basis.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first bit of DC comics that I actually bought into, as far as buying the comics, was when Jim Lee did his Hush run on Batman. Being a huge Jim Lee fan, I had to get it. Yeah. You know, I had to get it just purely 100% just the art alone. I didn't really care how the story was going to go or what it was about. I'm one of those people that really liked Hush. Collected all the issues. Then he hopped over and he did Superman for the same kind of thing, like about a 12-issue run. And I collected those ones because, again, I like picking up anything with Jim Lee. And that was my first kind of like actual, I physically own a DC comic that you know is not, you know, fitting in with the rest of my of my collection. But you know, after that, then I had always had this interest in Green Lantern, because everybody always, like, when they look at the Justice League, it was always like you had your camp of Superman, he's the best, or, you know, Wonder Woman, like the big three, Wonder Woman or Batman, right? And Batman I equate to, like, I like Batman, but he's like Wolverine in Marvel, in the sense of, like, he's really cool, he's badass, but too many people like him, without really understanding the character. They just they just like him. So for some reason, I started gravitating towards Green Lantern, and then the more I started looking into it, and the more I started reading it, and then Jeff Johns came on, did the Rebirth, which I read through, and I was like, that was pretty cool. And oh, wait a minute, he's been writing the actual comic itself. Let me check out some of those. And then all of a sudden I was like, wow, I really like this character, and I like the entire you know, history of what they've done with the Green Lantern, and I just found myself, you know, falling further and further down that rabbit hole. But, you know, to this day, outside of buying, you know, the odd graphic novel or picking up some stuff online, I have not bought a DC comic.
Yeah. So do you, like, I think now the question is like, is there just something inherently better about Marvel than DC? Like, is it just they have the better writers, they have the better artists, or is it like the characters are inherently just better characters than DC?
Yeah, I mean, it's for me. It was always the X-Men seemed like superheroes but cool, right? Again, the Avengers, which I would equate more to the Justice League. I, you know, in my early years, I put the Avengers in the same boat as the Justice League. I was like, wow, what a bunch of clowns! Like, this group doesn't even make sense to me. And you know, I stuck with the X-Men. It was cool. It was edgy. They had really neat characters. It was just, you know, a lot of them were badasses. They were wanted by, you know, the authorities. It was just interesting. And as I, you know, continued to move forward, I just never really saw anything. Anytime I even, you know, snuck a peek at a DC comic to try and get, it just confused the hell out of me. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what was what. And it just didn't appeal to me from an art standpoint. And of course, you can't sit in a comic book store and read an entire comic, you know, because maybe the writer will grab you. But the art just never grabbed me. And it just, the characters overall in the early days just really didn't do anything for me.
Yeah, I think it's I think when you look at Marvel characters in general versus DC characters in general, I always found that Marvel characters always felt like they were a lot more relatable, and they were a lot more like you could put yourself in those shoes. Because again, for the example, like the X-Men, it's like anybody could be a mutant.
Yeah.
Like I remember being a kid and being like, oh, one day my mutant powers will kick in. I can't wait to find out what that is, right? Whereas you think of like DC, majority of the characters, like you can't really slot yourself into their position. Like Bruce Batman, at least he's human, but you have to be a billionaire.
Yeah.
Superman's from an alien.
Yeah.
Wonder Woman is an Amazon. Yeah. So it's like it's one of those things where it always felt like yeah, they're really interesting superheroes, but you can never like, you know, put yourself in their shoes. You can never like imagine yourself being that superhero. So it's just like they're really cool. And I always felt like that's why it always felt like more like you kind of want to read the Marvel day to day, like the comic book issues, because it's like you can actually relate to them. They have more human lives that you can put yourself into. Whereas DC was like, it was really cool when they did giant bombastic things, but like you never really cared about their day to day life.
No, and I would agree. Like, I mean, you know, as much as I like Green Lantern, I know very little about non-Green Lantern stuff in Green Lantern. Same thing with the Flash. Of course, Superman, Batman are probably the two that I would, and it's mostly because there were either a TV series or there was a movie that was put out or there was cartoons that you watched. So, you know, those two I toss out. You know, Wonder Woman, I really don't know much about even that character. You know, there's other characters that have appealed to me, like Cyborg. I thought was always kind of a really neat character idea. Martian Manhunter, you know, another one that I very much like, but I didn't know enough about them on that level. And to your point, like I think DC has always done a great job of those like superhero-y storylines.
Yeah.
Not so much touching on the personal life side of things, but the big superhero story arcs. And I think that's where, you know, I've noticed, I agree with you. I think some of the storylines that I've read over the last little while have always been interesting to me from a DC perspective, because and maybe they do this on a regular basis, and as a non-DC reader, I just don't know this, but they always seem to be like something will happen in that comic, and I go, or that graphic novel or that whatever, and I'll go, did they just do that? Like they're willing to push, I feel, much further in the direction of quality shock value than Marvel does. And when I see somebody die, or I see somebody get hurt, or I see like a relationship, you know, break down between, you know, two superheroes in DC, you know, the same thing when it happens in Marvel, I'm like, yeah, give it 12 issues. You know, like it'll be back. And I just don't get the same feeling.
Interesting. Like I feel like, I wonder why that is. Maybe because Marvel's just pumping out too many storylines too quick, or type of thing, or they always want to go back to the status quo, which I feel like is interesting to say about Marvel, because I felt like that was the reason why they were better than DC, because DC felt like they were always the same thing over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Whereas Marvel was doing a lot of changes, and now it feels kind of like it's kind of reversing, where Marvel's like, let's just keep with what we know sells money, or gives us money, and then DC's now like, we gotta do something, you know.
Yeah.
Start changing things.
And I think it was also a lot to do with like, especially in the like 80s, 90s, you know, prior to the mass exodus into Image. I think that Marvel did a great job of holding on to top level talent. Like at one point, you know, I remember I was reading comics that were like, you know, you had Todd McFarlane was drawing Spider-Man. You had Jim Lee was doing X-Men. You had you know, all these good writers still involved. You had, like, they did a really good job of holding them together, like at the detriment to the writers and the artists, because I don't think they gave them enough credit for the level of popularity. It wasn't just the fact that it's a Spider-Man comic, it was the fact that it was a Spider-Man comic drawn by Todd McFarlane that was pushing the popularity. Whereas I just never saw that with DC until you started seeing some of these artists flow away to Image. Some of them went over and spent some time with DC, and then all of a sudden the art and the appearance of the characters started to change. And I think that's, for me, that's when I really started noticing it. When I started like, wow, like Jim Lee's Batman looks pretty dope.
Yeah.
You know, even, oh, wait a minute, he drew Superman, and I'm paying attention.
Yeah, I don't hate it.
Yeah, I don't hate it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic, is like how influential artists and writers are on whether or not you pick up a series.
Yeah.
Because I mean, a big acquisition that happened for DC a couple of years ago is they actually took Bendis, who for the longest time, writing Michael Bendis was like Marvel's guy. Like they had an event, it's like, oh, give it to Bendis. Spider-Man, give it to Bendis. Avengers, give it to Bendis. And then, you know, he eventually just was like, no, I'm gonna try something new and go to DC.
Yeah.
And DC's like, you know, a contract, you're only writing for DC. But even though I love Bendis, I never felt the need to then go switch over to DC. Like, no, I thought about it, but it was just like, oh, he's not writing any character. Like, he was writing Superman. I still don't give a shit about Superman, even if it's Bendis.
Yeah,
so it's like...
And I think that's what kind of surprised me is like he went over, and, you know, as popular as he was in this, like, superstar writer, I've heard nothing. Mm-hmm. Like, and again, don't collect DC Comics. Mm-hmm. You know, I follow it sparingly here and there, so maybe there are some very good storylines that I'm just not aware of, but I mean, it was just like it was made out to be this big coup, like, oh my god, Bendis is going over to DC, and then it's just like, okay, to me I felt like, okay, nothing happened. Like, he's done nothing. He's, like, in my opinion, he's done nothing over there worth you know raising the roof over. It just, to me, it was always described to me when I was a kid. It was like, oh, you know, we'd always come across these like old comic book collectors, even when I was a kid. Yeah. And they would always be like, oh, you know, not Marvel. It's always, you know, Marvel's for kids. DC is for adult comic collectors.
Oh yeah. And
you know, I do have to say, like, I think DC definitely tackled more risque topics. That I remember hearing about, that I was like, oh god, you never see that in a Marvel comic book, which I guess maybe lent to that a little bit. Maybe you know, it wasn't as, I don't want to say cartoony, but it was, you know, very much like the movies. Like, the movies for DC have been very dark and brooding, and you take some of the most like colorful, and I mean just outfit-wise, people in Justice League, and you put them into a movie, and it's like, man, I feel depressed still, you know, because just the way they ran it. Whereas Marvel is like, as much as, you know, Endgame and those the last couple of movies were very dark, kind of dark. Mm-hmm. You still had the laughable moments. You still had the, it was still had that like kind of bright side to it. Yeah. And I always felt like DC was always very gritty.
Okay, interesting. I mean, like, I'll agree. Like, when I start thinking about, like, again, the storylines that I enjoyed, it was always the grittier ones. It was always, you know, Frank Miller and that, and even like you said recently, like, Deceased has been really cool and whatnot. But then you start thinking about, like, when I was a kid, Batman and Superman were always like the lame characters, where it's like, oh, I'm on my way, you know, type of thing. And I remember being a kid like, oh, that's lame. I want to read Ghost Rider or even X-Men, because Wolverine's got the claws and like, they look cooler and whatnot. So it's funny that it's been a major transition from the two of them. Now that Marvel's like the more light side, you know, have a good time type of comic book, and DC is now the dark and brooding and like, let's just murder everybody type of thing.
Like, but that's where I feel like certain characters in Marvel, that if they would have been brought up in the DC side of things, I think you would have seen a different result out of. Like, for instance, the Punisher. I've always felt like Marvel has failed epically a number of times with the Punisher, because the Punisher could be very gritty and tackle some ugly looking things, and they kind of got to that when they went into the Max label comics and tried to, you know, make it hardcore. But, you know, for the most part, I felt like it was always like, oh, here's the Punisher, but the, you know, the violence and the grittiness and the real life side of it was just watered down. Whereas I feel like if that character was in DC, especially in the earlier years, I think you would have seen some messed up shit.
That's interesting. I mean, Marvel does have some dark, or I was going to say Marvel has some dark comics, but they're you're right, they are very few and far between. Yeah. Like, the only one I can really think of is Rick Remender X-Force. Yeah. Other than that, like, I don't know. Like you said, they did have the Max label for a little bit, but they didn't really have much. And even now, like, DC is now moving into, like, they have the Black label side of their comics, where it's like that's where they're now putting, instead of Vertigo, they're not putting like even darker comments on their black label. So, that is interesting.
And
so,
even nowadays, as you're looking at it, saying, "Well, oh, Marvel's getting grittier," yeah, but that's like the expected level of what you're getting now in anything. Mm-hmm. It's not like oh, Marvel. Oh, how risque! Look at they're just taking this massive risk with what they're doing, because they're tackling the subject, or they're tackling the. That's just what you would expect picking up any comic book. They're not. I don't find that they're any better or worse than anybody else out there as far as tackling those more realistic issues. Somebody, civilians get killed in this comic. Oh my God. Well, no, you can see that in anything now. Like, if that would have been happening, 20 years ago, be a different conversation. But I mean, now people are looking for, it's weird because people want that gritty level of realism to say, like, I want to believe that Batman could exist, and that it's realistic. But at the same time, they complain like, oh, this is too dark. It's like, okay, you can't have both. I think there are certain characters, like, could you imagine, Gotham City, you got Batman with Punisher.
Oh jeez.
They
kind of with Red Hood or something.
But that level of that type of character in that kind of grittiness, that gritty real world kind of feel, that's where those characters would thrive. And I feel like, taking the Punisher and throwing him on, the Savage Avengers or whatever the hell they got there, and then for a while he was like heading up the Thunderbolts. Yeah. Like, this guy is not, like, he's unstable, and for the most part he just runs around shooting people that he thinks should, be punished. Yeah. Like, that's the whole concept of his character for the most part. I feel like they've missed the boat on that character. But on the same time, if you flipped over and said, okay, well, what if Superman was in the Marvel universe? Would it have been better? I don't know. Yeah. I just don't know.
Because I think that's another thing to think about is, like, when you pick a character to follow, that's usually when you start getting invested in that whole universe's storyline and whatnot, because that's when they start having, like, the crossover events and whatnot and all that stuff. Like I said, I did try to read Aquaman, but I never felt like, oh, I now need to go read a bunch of other DC stuff to keep up to DC. Whereas when I read Marvel, like, you got House of X, Powers of 10. When I read, like, Marauders, I suddenly have the urge to go read the other X-Men books to keep up with the Marvel universe and whatnot. Like, I feel like it's one of those things where it's like, I think it's fine to be primarily a Marvel fan and then pick and choose what DC books you read. But I just don't understand, like, I just don't see the appeal of what the DC universe offers that makes me want to go see, like, pick and choose. Like, again, it just feels like the big storylines that I hear are really good, I'll check out. But other than that, I don't feel the need to read it, like, every week.
Yeah, and I don't think these recent kind of restart-ish, rebirth, whatever you want to call it, type things, when they went to the New 52 and then they did Rebirth, and I don't think that helped, because I think if anything, it kind of even confused people that were even kind of mildly collecting it or trying to pay attention to it. And it's like, okay, is this a restart? Is it not a restart? Like, what universe am I in? Like, okay, there's all these, the various different DC universes with all these different characters that aren't different characters, the same. It just, like, for somebody coming in at that midpoint of you're lost. Yep. Whereas I feel like Marvel's the same no matter what. The only thing that might confuse somebody is they might come in and go, okay, why is there another Spider-Man running around named Miles Morales? Okay, he's from a different universe. Oh yeah, but that was during this event. Now he's just in the same, they're all in the same universe. It's not overly complex. It's not confusing. Like, to me, it's like, with DC, that's what always confused me. Like, I don't even know what the heck's going on with Superman right now. Yeah. Because it was like, it was Superman, he wasn't Superman, now he's Superman with Lois, but now he's got a kid, but the other one didn't. And again, for me, somebody that collects DC hardcore might be listening to this and going, what a bunch of idiots. They don't know anything. Yeah, I don't, because at the same time, what they've done has never appealed to me. Even though the characters I found fascinating to some extent, it just never grabbed me. And you can say, like, you're just a Marvel fanboy, or you can insult my intelligence because maybe I don't get the storylines for DC. It's not that. It's just I look at some of the characters and I go, yeah, I was a little kid that ran around pretending to be Superman. Mm-hmm. I was a little kid that ran around pretending to be Batman. But when it came to the actual comic side of things, I think you nailed it. To me, it was like what was fascinating about Spider-Man was you could read an entire issue and not see Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And you still, there was a good story there because the supporting cast was so well developed. There was good, interesting aspects of the personal life and the non-superhero stuff that you were still, relating to your point. Mm-hmm. Whereas with the other ones, it's like I'm down for Superman showing up at the last minute and beating the crap out of whoever, and it's kind of cool and fun to watch, but or even read to some extent. But I really don't have any. I don't care about Lois and his and his parents back in the farm in Kansas, and it just doesn't. It didn't just never resonated with me.
Yeah, and I'm curious. I feel like maybe it's just because it's been so stagnant for so long.
Yeah.
It's just an assumption that oh yeah, he's gonna be with Lois. Who can you name any other Superman love interest? I'm pretty sure it's just been Lois Lane for 99% of the time.
Yeah.
And even the same with any Batman. Yeah, he has Catwoman and sometimes he flirts with Talia al Ghul or whatever. But for the most part, it's probably just gonna be him and Catwoman, or he's gonna be by himself.
Yeah. Or anybody that's a reporter, apparently.
Yeah, apparently. Yeah. Which I feel didn't become a thing until the movies.
Yeah.
But that's just me. But yeah, I think it also evidence of this really speaks to the stuff outside of the comics that use the IP. When you look at we said earlier, the cartoons and the video games and whatnot, when they use the IPs of these characters, it always feels like DC does better with them. But it feels because the main appeal of those characters is the fact that they're superheroes. Not that they're people, but they're superheroes. So of course you want to play the video game where you're Batman and you're taking out people one by one in Arkham Asylum, or of course you want to play. Or you want to watch the Justice League cartoon where it's just a bunch of superheroes fighting intergalactic threats. It's great. Yeah. Whereas Marvel, it always felt like the thing I cared more about those characters was, yes, their superheroes are really cool, but it always felt like the other part I cared about is interpersonal relationships and how they're going to deal with these problems. Whereas when you look at the video game side of that, it was never just other than maybe Ultimate Alliance. Never, the only ones that really appealed to me, not a lot of the ones that appealed to me were the ones where it's oh, you're just playing as Spider-Man the whole time. The reason why Spider-Man PS4 that came out 2018, 2019 was the fact that you also saw his personal life and saw his interacting with Mary Jane and Miles Morales and whatnot.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I feel and even DC fandom just happened, so it's funny that we're doing Marvel versus DC right now. But you look at the video games they announced, Gotham Knights and Suicide Squad. It's it's not that you're gonna learn more about those characters. You're just gonna be Batman or not be Batman, but you're gonna be Harley Quinn. You're gonna be Deadshot, and just go beat up people, and that sounds like fun. Whereas if it was a deep dive into Batman's psyche, it's I don't need a deep dive to Batman's psyche. I know what he's about, so let me just go punch people as Batman.
Yeah. No, and I think that the these recent shakeups with DC obviously a result of some of I think some of the lack of results they've gotten from what they've been trying to do over the last, I'm going to say, decade, and then what Marvel has managed to do have kind of put them in I'm actually very much I was reading through some articles again preparing for this chat, and I was wow, it really looks like DC comic books are in trouble in the sense that maybe they do go to just more of a graphic novel format. Maybe they do that and then they put more focus into the areas where they have had, I think, more success than Marvel in the sense of the animated series. You could argue back and forth on the television series to some degree. Maybe that's where they go. Maybe they realize, okay, the real money now lies in the movies, and we got to fix our movies. We gotta do whatever we did with that first Wonder Woman movie, with the Dark Knight series that Nolan did. Somehow capture that and put it into other characters and create some better material that people gravitate towards. I'm curious to see what happens. I really do think that DC Comics is the comic book, weekly, monthly comic books are in trouble.
Yeah, and I did pull some statistics to kind of talk about this, like kind of looking into the future of DC versus Marvel, because obviously right now Marvel's in the lead. Like if you look at sales for 2018, Marvel was about 38% of the sales, and then DC was only 30. So it's not like a huge, like, they're double the sales, but, Marvel always has a lead, and then they are more popular because of all their movies and whatnot. But if you look at, like, comic books versus graphic novels, there's a crazy big movement, and I'm sure it's been happening for a couple of years now. But, like, $765 million of this area was in graphic novels, whereas only 355 were by comic book, like just comic books themselves. That's double more money in graphic novels than it is in comic books. And I feel like what's happening, and this is just me speculating at this point, is that what's happening is people are getting into comic books because it's cool now. You have the Marvel movies, you have even the Christopher Nolan DC movies. You have people who are entering the comic books to read them. But what's happening is the people they're talking to or the things they're finding are only the graphic novels. Like people go, oh, you want to know about Batman? Hey, check out Year One. Or if you want to know about Spider-Man, hey, here's a really good run by Bendis or something like that. And they're giving these new people graphic novels. And I feel like now you're building, like, especially, like, I mean, I'm a huge example of this. Like, that's kind of how I got into comic books, was mainly people going, hey, this is a good run, check it out. And I feel like that's what the industry is moving towards now. Like, you're always going to have, like you said, you're always going to have the guys who are doing individual issues. That's just the way they were born and raised type of thing. But I feel like the next generation, even, like, older people now getting into the industry, are just finding it easier just to buy graphic novels. And have the story all ready to go and whatnot. And if DC is now going, hey, let's, slow down how many individual books we do and just send out really cool graphic novels, I feel like that's something they're going to really capitalize on moving forward.
No, and I think it's we discussed this as part of the how we read comics and whatnot, and I was very much the issue by issue type collector. But I think us us old dinosaurs can't be the reason why you continue to pound the table and get these issues out. You have to look to the future, and you have to look to, okay, what kind of fan is attached to our particular genre, and how are they attached? And I think you're seeing much more people now attached to it out of TV series or movies, animated series. And if they go as far as saying, like, hey, you know what, I really like this, I want to read some of this stuff, it is going into the graphic novels, because you go into any bookstore out there and you can find graphic novels all over the place. And it's a nice, you get the complete run of a particular storyline. Like, I completely 100% understand the appeal. And I thought that even the online stuff was even better, because now I'm not cluttering my house with a ton of stuff. I can see where the appeal is, and I think DC may be looking at this, maybe I'm wrong, but they may be looking at this and saying, you know what, we got to jump the gun because we see this is where it's going, and just do it. And it might not be popular at the beginning, but sometimes you got to make those decisions to not only save your company, but also to move things forward in the right way. And with all the other shakeups that they've done as far as people moving from positions and layoffs and all the stuff that they're doing, you can see they're really kind of tightening up what it looks like. They're just tightening up the ship. And I think they are going in a direction of saying, hey, graphic novels are where it's at. That's where we got to hit it. And then on top of that, we got to turn around and nail the movies and nail the ways that people are consuming this product now, instead of putting everything into making these old dinosaurs happy because we're cranking out a monthly comic book.
And I think there is still value, and we've talked about this before, of making the old dinosaurs happy. There obviously still is. It's just one of those things where it's like you have to make sure you're still, we want DC Comics in 10 years. We want Marvel to keep going in 10 years type of thing. So they got to make sure they get that new generation. They get the new people. I think the one thing that Marvel has over DC when it comes to, you know, new people and going forward and whatnot. It definitely feels like Marvel has spent a lot of time and money in the last couple of years to make newer characters.
Yeah.
Not necessarily like brand new, never before seen type of thing, but like taking older characters and, you know, giving them a fresh coat of paint. Like, you know, Captain Marvel is now, you know, Carol Danvers, and she's now super popular. Miss Marvel is now Kamala Khan, super popular. You have Miles Morales, who's super popular. Like, it feels like what they've been doing is they've been, you know, diversifying and like making sure, like, hey, everybody's covered. If you want a character you want to relate to, we have it covered. Whereas it doesn't feel like DC does that.
Yeah. I mean, Marvel has always done that, though. Like, they've always been ahead of the curve when it comes to diversity. You know, whether it was, oh, hey, look, you know, when Spider-Man's fighting the Green Goblin and you see people in the crowd, you would see people there was a diverse crowd that was watching the fight, you know, or I remember seeing panels that were brought to my attention, didn't even think about it, but there was panels where at the time when the comic was written, you know, somebody'd be hurt and they're being taken care of by a African-American doctor, which at the time the comic was written was like that's just like not something that you saw ever. You know, so they've always had that, and they weren't afraid to go there. I just think they've just, over the last little while, with those characters you brought up, they've just done a good job of really nailing it. So that the characters, because they did have, you know, Spider-Woman, they did have, you know, some of these female characters in the past that just never really did anything, and I think they've just done a better job of going, oh, okay, it's not good enough just to make them, you know, of a minority background or a particular, you know, religious background, or make them just a woman. We actually have to have character there too. They have to be likable, and they've just done a good job of going, hey, here's a character that is female and is awesome. And read this comic book, and you know, everybody that has picked it up has gone, yeah, okay, I agree with that.
Like, they're not banking on the fact you're just reading it for the diversity. You're banking it's also a good story that anybody can relate to.
I mean, if that was the case, then Wonder Woman would be the most popular comic among female comic book readers just because she's female. Yeah. You know, and that's not the case. You know, she's gone through some absolutely horrifically just awful transitions as a character. If you go back and look at the old history of Wonder Woman, you know, to now, you know, great movie, comic book from you know, a couple of people that I do know that follow it, think it's much better. It's interesting. It's good. Like, they're doing better, but not as well as Marvel's just managed to nail it with some of their more recent changes of some of these characters, like a Captain Marvel.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so I think, Marvel versus DC, I think it's just one of those things where it's like, DC has good IPs and they are interesting superheroes, but Marvel just always feels like they have better stories and they have better, more depth to their characters and whatnot.
Yeah. I would say, you know, it comes down to, I think, again, it comes down to personal preference, because some people are just like diehard DC, you know, but I think it's certainly opened up, I would say, over the last couple of years, even for myself. I was always the, you know, the Marvel loyalist. You know, I got to stick with Marvel, and that's what it is, and I gotta collect all the Marvel comics, because, you know, that's what a Marvel fan does. But, you know, the more of late, the more I've kind of dabbled into other stuff, I've realized, like, okay, you know what, actually, you know, I like some of this DC stuff. I like Green Lantern. I like Batman. You know, I like some of these other characters that I've gotten to see through, whether it's TV series or animated series. And I'm glad through those other mediums I've been able to experience them, or else I never would have picked up one of those comics and read them.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, because another thing I find very interesting is like how do people pick their favorite characters and whatnot.
Yeah.
Like it's like, I remember, you know, again, Ghost Rider, it was just like, he just looks really cool, and then you start reading him and it's like, oh yeah, I'm actually enjoying this and whatnot. So it's curious to think, like, somebody could just one day, you know, go in a store and like, oh, Aquaman looks really cool. I'm gonna check him out. Like, not knowing anything about Aquaman, or like, even like you said, like it's gonna be something super random, like Green Lantern. Not, I guess Green Lantern's not super random. Like Green Martian Manhunter or something.
Yeah,
I don't know anything about this character, but he looks cool, so I'm gonna check it out. And I'm curious, just like if character, like, does Marvel just have better character designs in general? I think so.
Yeah. I think you've seen DC make certainly a shift in the direction of changing up their characters to trying to modernize them or something, like to make them look a little different. But no, I agree with you. I think for the most part, just looking at characters. But I mean, that's one of the problems. Like, I feel like Jim Lee. I've seen Jim Lee draw some very interesting characters in the sense of, okay, he drew a He-Man, like just a one-shot He-Man poster kind of thing. And you look at it and go, man, I collect that comic. Because the art's so good. Oh, and just the way he positions it, oh man, that looks really cool.
Yeah. But
I mean, it could be just an absolute trash fire once you read the actual comic, and that's what I find interesting about some of these characters is like, I think what appeals to me with some of these DC characters like Green Lantern, I like the fact that really all he has is his willpower. Is other than that, he's a flawed character through and through. He's got some horrible characteristics to him, but at the end of the day, he's the guy you can count on because he just will not break, right? And that to me is kind of appealing. I like that. Okay, this guy's really flawed, and he's not right all the time, and he's not perfect. But he has this, there's this thing about him that just draws to me, and I go, hey, I like that. I like how that works. I like how that aspect of the character plays within that comic book.
Yeah. I think that's another point that you kind of subtly made there, is like, if you look at the flagship characters of each DC versus Marvel. So DC had the big three. So you have not Captain America, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and then you look at Marvel's big three, which is Spider-Man, X-Men kind of count as their own thing, and then I would say like Iron Man / Captain America type of thing. It definitely feels like DC's big three are just perfect characters that can never do wrong or anything like that. And then you have Marvel's, which is like, no, they're real people who have issues. And again, I feel like that's another key point that reiterates our ideas about why one might be better than the other, is just the fact that, like, why would you want to read a comic book about Superman where you know he's never going to lose? He's never going to do anything wrong. Like, it's just the same thing for the past, 70 years, 50 or 90 years or whatever. So it's just like, Batman's never going to lose.
Well, and it made me laugh because somebody, and I saw it, I think it was a meme or something like that on Facebook or something like that, where they'd said, okay, so in Superman 2 in the 80s, Superman kills a powerless Zod, and crowd cheers. Yet, when was the Man of Steel came out? 2016.
I think it was earlier than that.
Like maybe earlier than that. Yeah. He kills a powered up super Zod to save a family, and everybody's like, "Oh my God, what are you doing? How can he possibly do that?" Like, it's. I think a lot of it's got to do with, there's certainly writing impacts it. I've certainly collected comics just for the writer. Art was trash, but the writing was good. On the other side, I've also collected comics because the art was fantastic, but the story sucked. But ultimately, it's. I think it also comes down to how much time have these writers over the years spent developing the actual character that's not maybe representing in every comic as you run forward. Like, you don't hear about Spider-Man's, the power of responsibility in every issue as you go through it, but it's there because there's this backstory to this character that's been really well developed over these years. That you can kind of lean on and go, okay, even I'm going through this rough patch with this character because it's bad art and bad story, but I know the character, and I'm okay. I'll keep on with this because of the character. I don't know. I can't speak to a lot of the DC stuff because I don't know the older stuff, but I think some of the newer stuff, like I think Jeff Johns' run on Green Lantern was one of the best runs on comics that I've ever seen. I put him right up there with Bendis's run on Daredevil, how he fixed Daredevil. I would put it up there with certainly even some of Claremont stuff with the X-Men for its time. I think it's a lot of that is how much time in the past have they built? And it feels like, to me, it's like DC's now starting to get there. And they're starting to spend a little more time developing their characters, which I think that's where you're starting to see a shift of people going like, I'm gonna pick up these graphic novels, or, oh, did you read Court of Owls? That was amazing. Like they're getting into this DC stuff, but it's just in a different way. They're getting into it via the graphic novel.
Yeah, very interesting. I think an important thing to remember when you're talking about Marvel versus DC is like there is no definitive answer, because obviously it's always going to be subjective. There's nothing you can go like. There's always just going to be somebody who just prefers Batman over Spider-Man. But I think you can't just be so black and white with it, where you just go like, I'm only Marvel. Like there is good stuff in DC that you can just check out, and I think that's what comic book fans need to realize. It's like, I don't think you need to be so brand loyal that you start burning books or anything like that. Like, no, there's just good stuff on both sides, and just you may spend more time on one side, but doesn't mean you just completely pariah the other side.
No, I 100% agree with that. I mean, there was a time where that's what it was. It was like you either read DC or you read Marvel. There was that separation. You're either in my group or you're in that other group. And now it's become a lot more blurry because people do either collect or read or follow or play the video games or watch the TV. There's just too many. Like, it used to be just comics. With the occasional, crappy 80s movie. But now there's so many mediums that this stuff is getting thrown out in that, you're going to like a little of this, a little of that. I remember when Image came out. I flat out turned into a huge Image guy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I read all of them. Youngblood,
Savage Dragon.
Savage Dragon. Actually, I think that was the only one I was just not up for, because I just couldn't stand Eric Larson, the artist. But the Wildcats, the Stormwatch, I read all of them because they were it was different. It was interesting. It had that it had the gritty world, real world kind of feel to it. But unfortunately it didn't last. And the other comic companies kind of went, "Ooh, crap! We just had all our people leave." And they got around to fixing it. But I think it comes down to personal preference. Like, get to know who the character is, and if you like the character, you're gonna like the character. And there's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't mean like, oh, you like that character. Oh, they're in DC. Ugh. Like, oh, you're a fanboy. No, if you like the character, you like the character. Period. That's the end of it. It brings you joy, and you enjoy the story, and you like the character. You and I have had this conversation about various characters within Marvel. Ghost Rider being the most contentious one between the two of us. So what? Ultimately, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter.
No, you like the thing you like.
Yeah.
And that's good. Like, just keep going on, man. Like, it's always good. Like, we always say, it's always better to have more fans. So just keep going. Like, don't be hateful.
No. And I think the only thing that's going to shake things up over the next little while is just where these companies decide to go with the branding of their company. Are they going to continue to do everything that they are doing right now, or are you going to see more push towards the TV, movie media, or graphic novels, or whatever they're doing? You're going to like all things. You're going to turn some fans off, and they're going to go, I give up. I'm never going to read this again. And you're going to but at the same time, you're going to be capturing new fans. And at the end of the day, I think reading through storylines and graphic novels is giving me a different appreciation for what they are. Whereas before I was dead set against, was like, my old crotchety, like, I got to collect the comic. It's the same thing with DC. It's like, no, it's okay. I'm going to read a Green Lantern, and I don't really care if somebody says, "Oh, that's DC." I don't care. I like the character. It's the same reason I'm going to pick up a Batman comic. Is because I like the art and the story seems cool. I'm gonna give that a read. There's some good stories out there. So thanks everybody for listening. If you disagree with us 100%, you're a huge DC and you want us to go to hell, let us know in the comments. We would appreciate to hear your opinion, and we'll see you all next time. See you next time.